Hi, everyone. Welcome to Pipeline, the show where I interview creative and innovative people and learn about their projects. On this episode, my guest is Dr. Brent Smith, pediatric psychologist at the Shriners Hospitals for Children, clinical assistant professor at the University of Texas Medical Branch in Galveston, and creator and host of the YouTube channel Parent Psych. Brent, welcome to Pipeline.
Thank you, Scott. It's good to see you again.
Good to see you, my friend. Full disclosure, Brent and I were in the PhD program at the University of Houston together. I was in educational psychology and individual differences, and Brent was in school psychology. Took many classes together, and that's how we got to know each other. So my first question, Brent, is how are you and your family doing during this time?
We are doing really good. Thankfully, we had just purchased a house last summer. So we have plenty of space in the backyard where we've set up a garden, and my wife is very creative. So we have lots of crafts and fun things going on. So we've managed to stay pretty busy and tolerate it pretty well overall.
Good. I notice behind you some works of art.
Yes.
Are those products of your wife and you working with your kids?
Mostly her and mostly the kids. Yes, they like to draw and paint and do kind of crafts all the time. So several of our walls in the house are full of their work.
Nice. That's so cool to support your kids' creativity. So Pipeline, as we discussed earlier, the main point of the show is to talk to creative and innovative individuals about past projects, current projects, and future projects. So my first question to you is, what project in the past 5 or 10 years are you very proud of or found very meaningful or challenging?
Yeah. So I just got licensed about 3 years ago. So
congratulations.
Yeah, thank you. That was an achievement. So I would have to say that the project I'm most proud of during the last 5 or 10 years is getting through grad school and getting licensed, because as you know, that is a 5-6 year process to get up to that point.
And during that process, you know, there are a lot of our viewers and listeners who aren't aware of what that process entails. What were some of the challenges along the way in that process for you?
Let's see. I would say there was first just the time challenge. I mean, setting aside 6 years of your life to do something is that's a sacrifice.
Yeah.
It's a sacrifice financially. It's a sacrifice in other ways as well. So that was a very tough part. But I think it was 100% worth it. I think it was very rewarding to be able to take the classes that we did at UH. We had some excellent professors and excellent clinical experience too. I mean, most people don't know that Houston has just such a wealth of clinical opportunities for people that are in the medical or the mental health field. And so getting to go to places like Harris County Psychiatric Center or different inpatient children's hospitals around Houston and work with kids in that capacity, just extremely rewarding.
Excellent. My end was more research based, but hearing from you and others in the cohort, that's a long process. And part of it, what advice would you have for the spouses of somebody going through that process?
You should ask my wife that question, Scott. I think know what you're getting into. It was something my wife and I talked about before I started. And so she knew what sacrifices were going to be there and how it was going to be a struggle at times. And she was just so supportive, and it was something I couldn't have done without her. I think for spouses, it's important to take care of yourself. Make sure that you guys have that time together. And that's not just the spouse's responsibility, obviously. That's both people's responsibility. But making time for self-care and time for each other. And then realizing that there is light at the end of the tunnel. It's really easy to get stuck in that grad school phase where everything is just so overwhelming and you're so busy and there's so many deadlines and there's so many projects to juggle. Your dissertation, your practicum placements, teaching a class, doing research on the side. There's just so much going on. But if you know that that's going to end in 2 years or 3 years and that things are going to slow down a bit after that, or at least be a little bit more stable, I think that really helps. It's very productive to keep that end goal in mind.
Great. And you know, it's one thing for a spouse to be on the same page with you. They understand your commitment. They understand what you have to do. How do you explain that to kids? You had several kids in the last few years. How do you explain to them that, you know, dad's gonna be busy and you know, how do you do that?
Yeah, that's a good question. I didn't have to do that in grad school. Our first child was born, gosh, it was a few months before my dissertation defense. So he was born all in the middle of that. And then our second son was born when I was on internship. And then our third son was born when I just finished postdoc and moved down here for my first job. So I never had to explain to them what was going on. They were too little to know. I had to explain to myself why I was doing this in the middle of having all these kids. But it went well. I think since then, I've made a very conscious decision to limit the time I work. So I work full time and I have this side project we can talk more about later. But I've made a very intentional decision to not let that get in the way of my family. So I haven't had to have those talks yet. There have been a few times where I need time to shoot a YouTube video or like I'm doing today, talking with you, and they're very understanding. I make sure we have some good time in the morning playing together and having fun, and then they can have their own playtime later in the day, and that's how we balance it now.
Awesome. That's great to hear. Now, you did mention taking care of oneself. So I can not imagine, and when we were in the program together, we had other cohort members who were juggling their coursework, teaching, and they were having a family, and it blows me away. So, you know, when you're going through this process of, you know, doing your internship, getting licensed, and you're having children, how do you take care of yourself? Because I'm sure there were some sleepless nights of taking care of your kids.
Yep.
How do you make sure you're okay?
I think for me, coping with that, there's a big cognitive piece to that. So I think how you think about your situation really impacts how you feel about it. Obviously, that's one of the basics of cognitive behavioral therapy. It helped for me that I had lived overseas for a bit before I started grad school, and my wife is originally from overseas, and so I spent 4 years in Asia. And before that, I was a police officer for a brief amount of time in Dallas. And so I got to see a whole nother side of life in both of those situations. And when you compare what a lot of people go through, whether it's on the streets of Dallas or in very poor communities in the Philippines or in China or Thailand or wherever, and then you compare the hardships, you know, we have in grad school, they're just not comparable, man. Like, you know, they're not. Like, even in the middle of grad school, you have a place to live, you have food. I don't think we had health insurance. We had an ER down the street, and my wife was able to get government health insurance for that last year of grad school. You know, we were taken care of. We had it so much better than most other people that, to me, it felt ungrateful to maybe. You admit that it's hard sometimes, but you don't want to complain too much about it. And so that was a big piece for me, is always remembering how fortunate, how blessed we were to have what we have. I think another part was just staying connected to family and friends. We have a strong faith community that was very important as well. All those things help, and so it was never awful. There was times where it was challenging, but it's a great opportunity. A lot of people would give anything to be able to have the opportunities we have.
So having that perspective that you're past being a police officer and traveling really helps you reframe that situation.
Yes, yeah. I wish everybody could have a few of those experiences.
And you mentioned the support group you had through your faith community and family. That's important.
Yep. Yes.
And were there any other strategies you used to take care of yourself physically? Do you work out? Do you exercise? Do you watch your diet? Things like that?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think we do. We try to do all of those things. So my wife is we both try to cook healthy foods, and so we eat pretty healthy. That's something we've passed down to our kids too. Actually, today I was making a video about how to train a kid to eat good, healthy, fresh vegetables and stuff. So that was fun. I try to exercise, try to go jogging a few times a week, try to do a few sets of pull-ups and push-ups every other day, nothing major, but just enough to stay active. And then a big part to me is trying to have a good nighttime routine. So making sure we get the kids to bed on time and that I have time to decompress, and usually try to end my night with just something like peaceful and kind of centering. So maybe a quick Bible reading and meditation and prayer, and then hang out with my wife and sleep.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Good to hear. And you look healthy and happy, so I guess it's working.
Yeah. So far, yeah.
Awesome. And I did see on social media your garden that you've been creating with your kids. Is that, it's very different doing a garden on your own and then doing it with children. What's it like watching them and explaining to them the whole process of growth and life, stuff like that? Are they old enough to kind of get it, or is it just digging around in dirt still?
Right. I think they get the basics. Yeah. They get the basics, understand how you can plant the seed and how it starts to grow and how it absorbs nutrients and takes in the sunlight and produces vegetables and fruits and all of that. So they get it on a really basic level, but they love it, man. They are just so excited. They'll always run out there and point to whichever new fruit is growing. And we have quite a bit. We've got tomatoes and sugar snap peas and watermelon and okra and a few other things. And so they love it. And then they get to pick those foods. And it's actually helped them. They've always been, they've not always been good eaters, but we've trained them to be pretty good eaters. But the few foods that they didn't like tomatoes, now that they can pick them and grow them themselves, they'll eat them. They're much more excited about it now that they see the whole process and where it's come from. So
yeah, that's huge. That's amazing. And I'm sure that homegrown vegetables are so good. They're just so delicious, and the tomatoes are awesome. And just that knowledge, that appreciation, and the pride, that we grew these, we brought them into our home, we're eating them. It's just a huge thing, and it must be such a treat to share that with your kids.
Yeah, yep, it is. It's really cool.
That's cool. Yeah. So my second question is, what project are you currently working on that you're excited about or you find particularly engaging?
Yeah. So I think the big one is this YouTube channel. So I started a YouTube channel. I actually launched it earlier this year called Pediatric Psych. And that arose as I was looking around, and I have lots of parents coming to me all the time in my professional life and sometimes in my personal life and saying, man, I'm having difficulties with my kid sleeping or with my kid eating, or I'm worried about anxiety in my child or whatever. And there's all these evidence-based good parenting strategies out there, but I feel like most people don't have access to them. So I wanted to make a YouTube channel where I could do what were supposed to be short videos overviewing basic evidence-based parenting strategies or techniques, things like that. And so I had that idea stewing in my mind for about 2 years before I actually started it. It took me a long time to kind of pull everything together, and mostly to get up the guts to start it and do it. But it launched earlier this year, and it's okay. I mean, it's nothing like amazing at all, but I've gotten some really neat feedback from people that sent me a message saying, hey man, I watched this video, or I watched all these videos. They were so helpful. Thank you so much. And that's been really rewarding. That's
great. I'm familiar with it. I've been watching it. I've been sharing it on social media. I think it's, like you, I think it's very important because not everybody has access to the research that you and I have access to.
Right.
It's helpful to them. I know once when I posted yours, I did have several friends of mine who are parents who were really excited about what you were doing. And, and like you said, it's that translation from research to the people who need it, to the lay person who they're not going to go look up in a library database the best practices for
Yeah.
we had to go through the process of
Uh-huh.
being good consumers of research and evidence-based practices. So that's
Right.
awesome that you're doing that for so many people. um,
Yeah.
what are some of the challenges you've faced in doing that?
Let's see. I think the main challenges are time, and then I don't know how to say this, maybe presentation. So time being, I have a full-time job.
Mhm.
We've got all the kids. We're in the process of becoming foster parents. So we just have a lot on our plates right now. And it's hard to make time to do these videos, prep for them, and do the social media posts. That takes a lot of time. So that's been a main challenge. But another challenge has been the presentation. So when I started this, I naively thought, oh, I'll put this information out there. It's good quality information. It's so useful. People will just, they'll love it. And that hasn't always been the case. I mean, I think it's one thing to put good information out there. It's another thing to present it in a compelling, engaging way. And that's something I'm still struggling with. Plus, as you know, starting your own, learning how to do the videography and edit videos, and I haven't even started with the whole sound levels and stuff. That's just too daunting right now. But there's all these other components, lighting, and there's so much going on. It's just really difficult to do.
So a lot of the technical aspects you're still learning.
Yeah, a whole new skill set.
It's not like you have a staff.
No. Thankfully, my wife has her degree in fine arts and design, so she's provided some advice, in certain areas. So that's been helpful. But yeah,
That's nice.
yeah.
And is she on salary, or is it?
No. Because it's not earning anything, nobody's getting this. Yeah.
Well, so when one of the things I wanted to ask you, because I don't know if I could do it. You're working, so you're doing this webcast, talking to parents, giving them good strategies to deal with different types of issues that they have with their kids. You're working with children who've been through some pretty traumatic events, especially burns. And how do you deal with the stress of that? We all, I would think, have different levels of empathy for any type of human suffering, but kids, wow, to see a kid go through that has to be very tough. How do you deal with the stress of that?
So I think there's two ways. The first way is being able to take the long view. So the really cool thing about the work I get to do is that we get to follow those kids for a long time. And you see a kid come in with a really large burn, and you work with them throughout their stay in the ICU and out into the outpatient stay, and then they go home. Then they come back for surgery revisions or other needs they have, and you get to see them grow and flourish oftentimes. And a lot of these kids do really well in the long term. Doesn't mean they don't have challenges. There's certainly challenges associated, lifetime challenges often with a large burn. But a lot of them do some really amazing things. So there's encouragement and hope there that you see. And it's always important to know that that kid that you see there in the ICU that's just had that large burn, that's in a lot of pain and having a lot of struggles and difficulties and trauma, that's not the end of the story. There's more to it. So I think that first component is very important. The second component, not to get preachy or anything, it's just the faith piece. As a Christian, we believe that what happens in this world is not the end of the story. It goes even further than that, and that there can be meaning in suffering. I think we have some research on post-traumatic growth that shows that from another angle, that people go through hard and difficult things. There's also an increase in personal strength, increase in family relationships and social closeness to those people that are close to them, increases in spirituality. They see new opportunities that they didn't see before. So there's a lot of kind of light in the darkness, I think. I don't know, but those are kind of the two ways it helps me. And I think a lot of my patients kind of share some of those things. They see the hope as they go through it. And a lot of them have kind of a faith component as well, but not all. And so it's kind of something that kind of permeates that whole that whole experience.
Yeah, that's very interesting. So, you being a researcher as well, having this background in research, you're doing you're working with children at a hospital. You are doing evidence-based strategies for parents on your channel. Has there been any recent research that has just like blown you away, that something in your area, your domain, that has really excited you, or that stunned you?
Uh-huh. Uh-huh. I don't know that there's anything that stunned me because I've only been doing burns for about 3.5 years. So everything's still kind of new and exciting to me. One thing that was kind of shocking to me is that when we look at burns, we look at burn size, call it a total burn surface area, TBSA. And so I guess coming into it, I assumed that the larger your burn, the worse outcomes you were going to have in terms of post-traumatic stress symptoms or depressive symptoms or things like that. Surprisingly, a lot of the research hasn't shown that to be true, that a really small burn can result in just as much post-traumatic stress as a really large burn, or vice versa. And a lot of it depends on kind of the personality variables or the coping style or the social support of the person who's received the burn. And so it's been really interesting to me to read about, and then to also see it in my clinical work, to see some kids come in with, this huge 70-80% burn and function really well overall. And then see others come in with something much, much smaller and really a really, really, really challenging time.
Really?
Yeah.
Yeah. I would not have thought that. That's
yeah. And so, for example, when I was talking about the post-traumatic growth, which is this idea that the trauma comes and it kind of shatters the things you think you know about the world and about yourself. And then as a result of that trauma, you start piecing things back together. And that's when we see those increases in kind of feelings of personal strength, openness to new opportunities, increased social connection, increased spirituality, those things. One of the research projects I did, which was a small project, but it was looking at those scores in comparison to TBSA. And as the TBSA rose, as kids had larger and larger and more serious burns, post-traumatic growth scores also rose significantly. And so the greater this kind of trauma, the kind of more growth you might have seen. That didn't mean that there was no distress. You could still have post-traumatic stress symptoms with that, although they weren't significantly related then. But it's just really neat to see the kind of the positive side of a really hard traumatic situation.
And with the current situation of social distancing, has this had an effect on your patients? Are families still coming and able to see them, or is that put another challenge there?
Yeah, it has put a challenge there, definitely. It's a good question. So normally we have caregivers that are able to be there together with the child. So maybe two parents in a room. And with the COVID stuff, it's gone down to only one parent is allowed in the room at a time. I think and I'm not speaking just of my families, but of other, patients in other hospitals too. I think a lot of people have faced job loss, and that's added a lot of stress to families that are already undergoing different medical situations. So yeah, it's just added a whole other layer to everything.
And do you work solely with the children, or do you interact and do you counsel the parents as well?
So the kids are our patients. Yeah. So we can do some support for families. Obviously we want to support them, but if they start to have their own mental health issues, then we try to get them some local help.
Okay.
Yeah.
Interesting. So my final question is with regard to what's coming down the pipeline for you. What is an upcoming project that you're looking forward to, that you're excited about, enthusiastic about, ready to jump in? Talk to us about that.
Yeah. So there's not really any new project. I think the big projects I'm excited about, enthusiastic about, are continuing the Parent Psych. It's the Parent Psych YouTube channel and the social media. I just launched it as a podcast as well. So continuing to add good content to that, and continuing to play around and experiment with it in terms of like video length and how I present things, who's included in it, just playing with it and seeing where it goes. I don't have any huge, and I don't want to say I have an investment in it, a personal investment, but there's no financial investment. This isn't done to really kind of benefit us. It's just more of something I feel like we need to give back. It's something I need to do to use my talents, wisely and effectively to help people. Yeah.
And where do you see it going? Do you see any changes in it coming, or are you going to keep the basic layout as it is now?
Yeah, I think for now we're going to keep it kind of like it is. I think it's just experimenting, like I said, with length, with how fast how fast stuff is presented. I mean, some of these videos end up being very long, like 20 minutes. And maybe that's not what somebody wants to do on a Friday night, is sit home and watch a psychology lecture for 20 minutes. So how can you convey that information in a more effective, briefer, more engaging way? So that's a piece. And then does it need to be something that's more of a podcast format, or do I need to make better use of the website? I don't know. Like, how do you get that information? How do you disseminate that information? Help people where it's useful to them, which, as you know, as researchers, that can be a challenge in itself. You publish something in a journal and few people see it.
Right.
I mean,
yeah. Are the people who need it really, do they have access?
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And are you planning on remaining as a YouTube channel, or any plans to have your own website or anything like that?
Yeah, I have my own website, parentpsych.org, but it's just kind of fallen by the wayside because I focus so much on the YouTube and try to repost stuff there. But yeah, I don't know. Like, that's the good question, man. Does it all need to be focused on YouTube, or should it be disseminated out? Should I post the same videos on Facebook and Instagram and other places? I mean, yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, well, I saw you had a good following on the YouTube channel, about 160 followers.
Yeah, it's grown.
Is it similar on Facebook? Do you have?
Yeah, I think I don't even remember how many people it is on Facebook. The Facebook interface is more confusing to me than the YouTube interface. But I do notice that most of my traffic to YouTube comes from Facebook. So that's kind of the main conduit.
And have you had some interesting questions from followers or parents?
Yeah, I've had a lot of concerns about like child anxiety, kind of child mental health conditions, and a lot of people wanting to make appointments. But I'm not set up for that. I don't do private practice or anything like that. I just don't have the time right now.
Do you have, I was just going to ask, do you have counselors, clinicians who you recommend to those people, or?
I try to find some resources. Yeah, I try to talk to them briefly and just give them some ideas of resources they might find useful. Like if it's in Dallas or Houston, there's a few I can recommend. But yeah.
And what advice would you have to not so much for anxiety, but just for parents who are having to work from home right now, who have kids who aren't in school, and they're having to, teach their kids stuff? What advice do you have for them with that? I mean, if you have 4 kids at different ages, that can be stressful. What advice do you have for parents in that situation?
Yeah, I think that's a good question. Something we've kind of dealt with our 3 kids. I think setting up a routine is really important. Structure the day. Important not only for the kids so they know what to expect, but I think it gives us as parents some peace of mind when we know what's going to happen during the day and we have kind of a plan. With some flexibility, knowing that not everything may go as perfectly as we planned it. But yeah, I think a good routine. I think it's helpful for us to separate the kids at times. It's great for them to play together, but then they, maybe have had enough of each other, and it's also good to have quiet time. And so one thing we make use of is quiet time, where you grab some books or some toys and you each go to separate rooms and you have, 30, 45 minutes to play on your own. I think that's good for kids too, to have that downtime where they have to kind of be creative and engage themselves and entertain themselves. We don't have a TV at our house, so that's not really an option, although they can watch a show here and there on a PBS app or something like that every once in a while. Mm-hmm. But for the most part, I think once kids get acclimated to that and used to that kind of structure and that routine, they do a lot better.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, Dr. Brent, thank you so much for being a guest on Pipeline. It's great to see you, great to hear about your current work. and what you're involved in, the good work that you're doing at the Shriners Hospitals. I hope we can stay in touch. I'd like to revisit you down the road and see where Parent Psych takes you and where you take it. But thank you so much for being a guest.
Yeah, for sure. Thanks so much for having me on, Scott. It's good to talk to you again.
All right. Take care, my friend. And to my viewers and listeners, take care of yourselves and each other. Thank you for listening.